and Eastern Kentucky. This is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Forest fires continue to pop up across the region. Several crews were called to one early this morning in Rockcastle County. These photos were taken by Livingston Fire and Rescue from just before 5 o'clock this morning. The fire was reported near Chestnut Ridge Road and Lilac Circle. It was contained after about 7 to 10 acres had burned. Fire crews from Mount Vernon, Climax, and Brawhead all assisted with the fire. We'll tell you about another forest fire in Harlan County coming up at 6. 2 students are now facing charges after a fire at Lincoln County Middle School. The fire broke out late Tuesday afternoon after school, but while some activities were still taking place. Those people were evacuated and ServPro arrived to start mitigating the damage. Police were called in to investigate and 2 students were charged with criminal mischief and arson.
Students have to realize there's consequences for bad behavior, or even in this case illegal behavior, and we always need to be cognizant of that, and we need to be teaching our students to do better.
The 2 students were taken to a juvenile detention facility. No one was hurt in the fire. The man accused of a 2019 mass shooting in El Paso, Texas appeared in court today. Patrick Crucius is accused of opening fire inside a Walmart, killing 23 people. Today's court appearance was part of a 2-day hearing on reported prosecution misconduct. His attorneys argue the El Paso District Attorney's Office had improper contact with witnesses, violated a gag order, and suppressed evidence.
We're still watching as that front is inching ever so closely to us, and it's still out to our west. And as we look at satellite and radar, you can see it moving in towards us. It's really starting to form, and if you see the location of this, take a look at those current temperatures, and you can already see the impact of this rain on Lexington and Louisville, dropping their temperatures almost 10 degrees cooler than it is here in eastern Kentucky. 75 in Hazard, 77 in Manchester even, as well as Harlan and Jonesville, really seeing those warm temperatures as that front is inching ever so closer to us. And as we get to those overnight lows and we begin to drop in our temperature, we're going to be seeing the 50s range, with some cities potentially seeing that 60-degree mark hit. 60 for Harlan and Prestonsburg, as well as Jacksboro, but a little bit cooler as you're heading more to the north. 53 is the expected low for Irvin. And as we go into the next couple hours, we'll continue to see that decrease in temperature alongside those rain chances. So if you are heading out, depending on what side of our coverage area you're in, you might have a little bit of interruption from the rain. I'll have more information coming up. Steve?
All right, Megan, thanks. This morning, Governor Beshear and the First Lady voted early in Frankfort. The governor also talked about the importance of early voting in his Team Kentucky news conference this afternoon.
Hey, Brittany and I got up and voted early this morning in Frankfort, and the process was quick and easy, though we are seeing lines, which is a wonderful thing. Voting is the bedrock principle of our society, and I'm proud of the bipartisan steps we've taken to protect every Kentuckian's right to vote and make their voice heard.
Early voting continues through Saturday in Kentucky. It was not just the governor and First Lady voting early. Many folks throughout Kentucky made their way to the ballot boxes today. Long lines were reported in some areas. The Scott County Clerk says they increased their number of voting booths this time around. Coming up at 6, we'll hear from folks in Laurel County about their experience with early voting. Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are headed out west as they push for votes in all the battleground states. The latest dust-up between the two comes as they go back and forth over a comment Trump made about women while campaigning in Wisconsin yesterday. CBS's Natalie Brand is in Pennsylvania with the latest.
Former President Donald Trump arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a state his campaign believes is closer than polls show.
So I'm here for one simple reason. I like you very much, and it's good for my credentials with the Hispanic or Latino community.
Both Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are focusing on western states today, holding dueling events in Arizona and Nevada. Before leaving Wisconsin, Harris criticized this remark from Trump during his Green Bay rally Wednesday night.
I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
It actually is, I think, very offensive, and this is just the latest on a series of reveals by the former president of how he thinks about women.
CBS News polling shows Harris currently holding a 12-point lead over Trump with women voters nationally.
I don't think he's presidential at all.
Josephine Lawley, who voted for Trump in 2016, calls it a big mistake. She and her husband were among those lined up to hear Governor Tim Walz speak at a union hall in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
I'll say it as nice as I can. He's despicable, arrogant, nasty. I just don't like him, period.
Not far away in Bensalem, supporters of the former president shopping at a store dedicated to him say they're voting for Trump's policies.
You know, he's very bombastic. You don't have to like his personality, but I think you really need to sort the issues out and ask the question, were you better when President Trump was in office?
When Trump came in, we heard what Trump said and what he did what he said he was going to do.
The political divide within this key Philadelphia suburb on full display at nearly every street corner in a state that could ultimately decide the election. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Early voting, known as on-demand mail ballot voting in Pennsylvania, is now done in the state, except for Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where a judge extended it through tomorrow. In the final days of the race for the White House, polls show little change in several battleground states with no clear leader. In Michigan, a new Washington Post poll shows 47% of likely voters supporting Vice President Kamala Harris compared to 46% supporting former President Donald Trump. The most recent CNN poll of polls was also close, with 48% supporting Harris and 45% supporting Trump. Those numbers are all within the margin of error. This election is already rife with misinformation, conspiracies, and threats over voting. With millions having already cast their ballots, questions loom regarding election security. Carolina Lopez is the executive director of an organization sharing best practices for having elections in very populous areas. Despite challenges, Lopez says officials are prepared after ballot boxes had been destroyed in the Pacific Northwest previously.
That particular scenario, I remember that we triaged that, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We are seeing it now in real life.
And with states like neighboring Virginia purging voter rolls, they say, to prevent non-citizens from voting. Lopez says it adds another layer of difficulty. Former President Donald Trump continues to insist that somehow the election process is rigged, and his false claims have prompted millions to worry their ballot is not safe and secure. In recent weeks, several states have tried to change their voting process on the home stretch of the election. Georgia politicians are squabbling over new voting rules that would allow counties to delay certification of votes and other changes as early voting continues.
It would have allowed tampering with election documents by providing greater access to election documents. It would have expanded the ways in which people might intimidate the people who work our elections.
Poll workers say there are increased threats to election security in recent years, one of which is physical violence to election officials who are 80% women. Vice President Kamala Harris broke barriers when she was named the first female vice president of the United States. Historians say there's been a long list of women who have blazed a trail in national politics. One historian and professor at American University says women have had to work twice as hard to be able to break barriers and achieve milestones. She says black women have had to work 4 times as hard, but that has not stopped Harris from running for president.
I think for male politicians, they can kind of just have a vibe, whereas women politicians, I think, have to work really, really hard to cultivate that vibe.
In the past, women who run for president have tried to have popular artists with them who were in vogue to motivate voters. For instance, Hillary Clinton did this in 2016 with Katy Perry. or in one of Harris's prior campaign rallies by having Beyonce with her. With the growing number of national brands making their new home in Kentucky, we are learning more about a $1 billion federal grant that's going to help meet some of those companies' demands. During today's Team Kentucky update, Governor Andy Beshear talked about the $1.4 billion in federal funding for Eastern Kentucky Power. Beshear says the grant will help increase the amount of electricity and renewable energy produced. Coming up.